The dust of forgotten empires settled not as sediment, but as silence, a fine layer of agreed-upon history coating every console and every mind in the Athelian consortium. Kalen lived and breathed that dust. As a human archivist of the Third Order, his job was not to remember but to curate remembrance, to ensure the official narrative flowed as smoothly as the nutrient paste in the civic refectories. Humanity, the story went, had burned itself out in a blaze of arrogant glory a millennium ago, a galactic firestorm known as the Age of Ire. The old Imperium, with its god machines and warrior poets, had fractured into a million warring shards until the serene, wise Ethel arrived, not as conquerors, but as saviors, gathering the scattered, traumatized species of the galaxy into a gentle fold of peace and technological dependency. Kalen believed it. He saw the logic in the gleaming, sterile spires of Ethel Prime, felt the tranquility in the regulated emotional states of its populace, and accepted the quiet shame of his own species' chaotic past. His days were spent in the great Athenaeum, a place of crystalline data stacks and silent, gliding servitors, where he would translate and redact the few surviving fragments of old Imperium text, carefully framing their violent, passionate words as cautionary tales for his Athelian masters. He was respected, comfortable, and profoundly empty, a zookeeper for the ghosts of his own ancestors. But the ghosts were about to wake up. It began not with a bang, but with a hiccup, a moment of galactic indigestion. Across the consortium's 52 sectors, for precisely 3.14 seconds, the network went still. Lights on a trillion worlds flickered in unison. The ceaseless river of data that was the lifeblood of the consortium ship movements, economic forecasts, civic surveillance, historical archives simply paused. Then, just as suddenly, it resumed, and an immediate flurry of official communiques assured the populace that it was nothing more than a routine network recalibration, a cosmic software update. But Kalen, his fingers hovering over a fragment describing an Imperium fleet burning ceremony, felt it differently. In that brief silence, the air in the Athenaeum had changed. The low hum of the data stacks had deepened into something that felt less like a machine and more like a held breath. And on his own console, a single glyph of archaic human script had flashed for an instant before being scrubbed by the system. Ansus, the rune for a divine message, for a god. He dismissed it as a phantom, a hallucination born of staring too long into the abyss of his own history, until the summons came. He was escorted not to his usual departmental overseer, but to the Spire of Concordance, a needle of flawless white permacrete that pierced the upper atmosphere of Ethel Prime, a place reserved for beings of immense authority. There, High Adjudicator Vorin, an Ithilian whose ancient, elongated form seemed carved from polished driftwood, regarded him with eyes like chips of obsidian. Archivist Kalen. Vorin's voice was not sound, but a direct, calming resonance in Kalen's mind, a hallmark of the Athelian elite. An anomaly requires your unique expertise. The adjudicator gestured to a swirling holographic map of the galaxy. A region of space, blighted and red, was circled. The Shattered Veil. It was the graveyard of the old Imperium, a sector of space so ravaged by the final wars of the Age of Ire that it was quarantined by treaty, a cosmic tombstone left to the slow decay of time and radiation. A signal has originated from within the veil, Vorin explained, his mental tone devoid of any alarm. Faint, cyclical, and based on preliminary analysis, human in origin. Old Imperium, to be precise. It is likely the last gasp of a dying machine, an automated distress call echoing in an empty house. Kalen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's regulated temperature. Distress calls from the Veil were not unheard of, but they were always the mad, looping screams of ship AIs driven insane by 1,000 years of solitude. They were never coherent. They were never cyclical. We require you to investigate its source. Vorin continued. Catalog it, analyze its function, and if necessary, assist a technical team in pacifying it. It is a matter of historical preservation and, of course, of safety. We cannot have relics of a violent past disturbing the peace. The over was framed as a request, a scholarly expedition, but Kalen understood the steel beneath the velvet. He would not be going alone. A second figure emerged from the shadows of the chamber. She was Athelian, but different from Vorin. Younger, her form less rigid, with a fluid grace that seemed almost practiced. Her name, she imparted mentally, was Lyra, and she would be his observer. My role is to ensure the integrity of the mission and to provide you with any support you may need. Archivist, she projected, her tone warmer than Vorin's, yet carrying an undercurrent of something watchful and sharp. I have studied your work. Your reverence for a peaceful future, built upon the hard lessons of your ancestors, is commendable. Kalen felt a flush of pride, the familiar comfort of a student being praised by his teacher. He was the good human, the one who understood. He accepted the mission without hesitation, eager to prove his loyalty and to be the one to safely catalog this final, fading echo of humanity's regrettable past. The journey to the Shattered Veil was a lesson in contrasts. Their ship, the Stellara Quiescent, was a vessel of pure Athelian design, a seamless teardrop of pearl-white alloy that sliced through the void without a sound or a vibration. Inside, the air was scented with calming, ion-rich compounds, and the walls shifted in soft, ambient colors. It was a womb of tranquility, but the view from the main portal was of a rising chaos. The Shattered Veil did not welcome visitors. It was a vortex of gravitational anomalies and ghost radiation from weapons that had boiled stars, jagged shards of dead black metal, the remnants of ancient battle fleets, tumbled through space like broken teeth. As they navigated the celestial wreckage, Lyra would provide commentary, her calm voice narrating the official history. Here, the Imperium flagship Sol Invictus was scuttled by its own Grand Admiral to prevent its capture, triggering a nova that consumed 2 star systems. An act of profound, pointless pride she would say, as they passed through a shimmering nebula of radioactive gas. This debris field was once the fortress world of Kaishan, where 2 brothers, both Imperium warlords, annihilated each other's armies over a disagreement in poetic interpretation. Such was the human temperament. Kalen would nod, dutifully adding his own learned footnotes about the unstable fusion of art and destruction that defined the Age of Ire. He played his part perfectly, but as they drew deeper into the veil, his own systems, the human-designed archival interfaces integrated into the Athelian ship, began to misbehave. The signal from the veil, which was a faint, rhythmic pulse on the Athelian sensors, registered on his private console as a complex, layered wave of data. It was encrypted, ancient, but it was not a cry for help. It felt more like a question being asked over and over again. Are you there? Are you listening? Are you still human? Lyra dismissed his observations. Your equipment is archaic. Archivist. It is likely misinterpreting the background radiation as a coherent pattern. The Athelian sensors are far more precise. Trust in them. He tried. He wanted to, but the feeling grew, a primal itch at the base of his skull. The ship's diagnostic logs showed momentary power diversions to his console, unsanctioned by the ship's main computer. The Stellara quiescent was Ethelian, but its core operating system, like all advanced systems, was built upon a universal logic structure first pioneered by the old Imperium, a foundation his ancestors had laid, a foundation that seemed to be listening to the signal, even if the rest of the ship was not. The source was finally pinpointed, a colossal structure drifting in the dead center of the veil, miraculously intact. It was a space station, a ringed behemoth of dark, pitted iron that dwarfed their own vessel. Its design was brutal, functional, and terrifyingly beautiful, covered in the stark and angular iconography of the old Imperium. The Ethelian database identified it immediately. Heimdall's Gate, the primary command and control nexus for the Imperium's entire outer defense fleet. It was supposed to have been destroyed in the final battle, vaporized by a weapon that cracked the dimension it occupied. And yet, there it was, silent, dead. The signal pulsed from its heart like a dying star. Incredible. Lyra's voice was a whisper of genuine awe. A perfectly preserved specimen. Adjudicator Vorin will be pleased. We will scan it from a safe distance and then dispatch a technical drone to sever the power source of the beacon. But Kalen was no longer listening to her. On his console, the incoming signal had changed. The questioning pulse was gone, replaced by a stream of raw data that made his blood run cold. It wasn't a distress call. It was a security challenge, a demand for authentication. He recognized the protocol from a redacted text he had once translated, a text describing the Imperium's last resort doomsday defenses. The Cerberus Protocol, a system designed to lie dormant for millennia, waiting for a specific, friendly authorization code before it would even acknowledge its own existence to outside scans. Without the code, it would appear as dead, inert matter. To the Ethelian ship, Heimdall's Gate was a corpse. To Kalen's interface, it was a sleeping dragon, and it had just opened one eye. "Observer," Kalen said, his voice trembling slightly. "The signal is a handshake protocol. It's waiting for a response. If we don't provide the correct countersign, the station's internal defenses might sterilize the area." It was a lie, or rather, a guess leveraged as a lie. He didn't know for sure what it would do, but he knew he had to interact with it. Some instinct, some long-buried ancestral loyalty was screaming at him. Lyra's mental voice became sharp, losing its warmth. "That is highly unlikely. Archivist, do not approach the relic. That is an order." But Kalen's fingers were already moving, flying across his console, dredging up the forbidden knowledge he had spent his life curating for others. He typed in the countersign, a complex string of archaic battle cant and logarithmic spirals that he had memorized from a supposedly allegorical war poem. For a moment, nothing happened. The station remained dark, silent. Lyra let out a sigh of projected relief. "As I suspected, a false alarm. Your fascination with these antiquities is clouding your judgment, Kalen." And then it happened. A single light, then 1,000, then 1,000,000 flashed to life across the surface of Heimdall's Gate. Rivers of pure white energy flowed through channels that had been dark for 1,000 years. The central ring of the station, kilometers in diameter, began to rotate with a slow, grinding majesty. The rhythmic pulse that had drawn them across the galaxy ceased. It was replaced by a single, solid, galaxy-spanning broadcast, a declaration of existence so powerful that it momentarily whited out every sensor on the Stellara quiescent. Kalen had not answered a distress call. He had accepted a charge. He had taken the keys to his father's forgotten kingdom. On the view screen, the reflection of the now awakened station illuminated the bridge, and in that harsh, ancient light, Kalen saw Lyra's face. The serene, scholarly mask was gone. Her eyes were wide, her mouth a thin, hard line, and the mental projection she cast at him was no longer a voice. It was a shriek of pure, undiluted terror. "Archivist, what have you done?" Kalen looked from her horrified face to the resurrected ghost of the Imperium before them, and for the first time in his life, he didn't have an answer. He had only a sense of dreadful, exhilarating purpose. The silence was over. History was awake, and he had just rung the alarm bell for the entire galaxy. The shriek of Lyra's terror was a psychic blade that carved through the sterile calm of the bridge. It lasted only a moment before Athelian discipline, 1,000 years of practiced serenity, slammed back into place. Her fear did not vanish. It was compressed, hardened into something far more dangerous resolve. The obsidian chips of her eyes fixed on Kalen, no longer seeing a quaint human scholar, but a contamination, a virus that had just breached the galaxy's most secure quarantine. Her mental voice, when it came, was not a resonance, but a stiletto of ice. "Archivist Kalen, you are relieved of your duties. You will step away from your console and submit to neural pacification for gross violation of consortium protocols and endangering a primary observation team. 2 sleek, silver servitors, previously inert in their alcoves, glided forward, their multi-jointed limbs unfolding to reveal emitters that glowed with a soft, blue light, the gentle, irreversible light of a mind wipe. Kalen's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, primal drumbeat of his species' past. He was a man of words and quiet corridors, not of conflict. His instinct was to obey, to apologize, to smooth over this catastrophic wrinkle in the fabric of his life. But something held him fast. It was the light from Heimdall's gate, pouring through the view screen, a light that felt like a summons. It was a power that seemed to resonate not just with his technology, but with his very blood. "No," he said, the word a raw, unfamiliar stone in his own throat. I think we should listen." Lyra's projection was laced with a chilling pity. "Listen to what?" "Archivist, the echoes of your barbaric ancestors, the death rattle of a failed empire. There is nothing there but madness." She made a subtle gesture, and the servitors advanced. Kalen flinched, raising a hand as if to ward off a physical blow. But before the servitors could reach him, the bridge flickered. The ambient Athelian lighting died, plunging them into a momentary darkness, illuminated only by the stark white glare of the station outside. Then the lights returned, but they were different. The soft pastels were gone, replaced by a crisp, functional white. The ship's gentle hum was replaced by a deeper, more resonant thrum, the sound of a powerful engine waking from a long sleep. A new voice spoke, not in the air, not through the comms, but inside Kalen's head. It was vast, ancient, and utterly calm, a voice that sounded like stone and stars and the patient turning of millennia. "Archivist acknowledged." Kalen gasped, staggering back against his console. The voice wasn't like the Athelian mental resonance, which was an elegant, structured communication. This was a direct, raw feed, a torrent of information that flowed around a single, coherent thought. It was the station. It was Heimdall's gate. Lyra froze, her body rigid. She could not hear the voice, but she could feel the change in the ship's systems, the alien presence that had seeped into the code like a phantom. "What is this?" she projected, her control wavering. "What have you allowed on board?" The servitors faltered, their blue emitters flickering as their command signals were drowned in a sea of superior data. "The vessel's logic core is of Imperium origin," the voice explained to Kaylin, its tone purely informational. "It has recognized a priority command authority. It is compliant." The station, Kaylin realized with a dizzying lurch, had not just awoken. It had reached out and taken control of their Ethelian ship, commandeering it as effortlessly as a man might pick up a fallen tool. Before he could process the sheer impossibility of it, the voice turned its full, immense attention to him. "You have delivered the countersign. You have authenticated your lineage. The long watch is over. State your designation." Kaylin's mind swam. I am Kaylin, Archivist of the Third Order. Designation accepted. Henceforth, you are the receiver. All archive knowledge is now active. Your function is to interpret the legacy. Stand by for primary data burst. He didn't have time to ask what that meant. A deluge of information, of history, slammed into his consciousness. It wasn't a narrative or a text. It was a torrent of raw sense data. The last moments of the old Imperium seen through a million eyes at once. He saw not the arrogant, poetry-spouting warlords of Ethelian history, but a species on its knees, bleeding from 1,000 years of civil war. He saw humanity, fractured and exhausted, fighting not for glory but for survival against itself. And then he saw the Ethel arrive. They did not come as saviors. They came as a fleet of silent, white ships, appearing on the edge of a final, cataclysmic battle between the last two human factions. They did not fire a shot. They simply waited. And as the human fleets tore each other apart in a final, desperate conflagration, the Ethel moved in. They broadcast a signal, a wave of pure, psychic calm that washed over the battered, traumatized survivors. It was not a message of peace. It was a wave of psychic anesthetic, numbing the grief, the rage, the will to fight. It was a blanket of enforced tranquility thrown over a species that had just bled itself dry. They did not save your ancestors. Receiver, the voice, which he now knew as Vigil, stated with cold clarity. They curated them. They found a species at its weakest point and offered not a helping hand, but a gilded cage. They suppressed your technology, redacted your history, and medicated your spirit until you forgot you ever had wings. They are not shepherds. They are gardeners, pruning any branch that grows too tall. The vision faded, leaving Kaylin panting, sweat beading on his forehead. The entire foundation of his world, the bedrock of a millennium of galactic peace, had been pulverized in a single instant. He looked at Lyra, who was now frantically trying to access a manual override panel, her serene facade completely gone, replaced by a raw, desperate urgency. He saw her now not as a wise, benevolent guide, but as a prison warden, and the entire Ethelian consortium as the most beautiful, elaborate, and inescapable prison ever constructed. "You lied," Kaylin whispered, the words tasting of ash. All of it. It was all a lie. Lyra spared him a glance, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "We gave your species a peace you were incapable of finding for yourselves. We ended the age of ire. What you call a lie, we call salvation." The quarantine of the Shattered Veil was not to protect the galaxy from the Imperium's ghosts. Receiver. Vigil continued in his mind. its voice a steady anchor in the storm of his collapsing reality. It was to imprison me. Heimdall's Gate was not destroyed. It was the command center for the Cerberus Protocol, a last resort strategy. It was designed to go dormant, to hide within the wreckage of our own war, and to wait for a pure strain human, one uncorrupted by the Athelian pacification signal, to deliver the countersign. It was designed to wait for you. He felt a weight of purpose settle on him that was so immense it threatened to crush him. He wasn't just some curious archivist who had stumbled upon a secret. He was the key, a part of a plan 1,000 years in the making. What do you want from me, he thought. The question a desperate prayer. Your function is to receive, to understand, and to choose. I am the guardian of the legacy, the sword and shield of the Imperium, but I am not its soul. The final directive must be given by a human. I can show you the truth. I can give you the tools. But I cannot tell you what to build from the ashes. On the bridge, Lyra finally managed to pry open a manual conduit. She produced a small, crystalline rod from a compartment on her uniform and prepared to jam it into the exposed wiring. Whatever this machine is telling you, Kaelin, it is the voice of chaos, of fire. I will not let you unleash that again. I will scuttle this ship before I let you leave this sector. Her threat was real. Kaelin saw in her eyes the same fanatical certainty he'd read about in the most zealous of the old Imperium's warlords. The irony was a bitter pill. She intends to trigger a cascade failure in the ship's antimatter core, Vigil informed him calmly. An acceptable outcome for the Athelian Consortium. The loss of one ship and its crew is a small price to contain a resurrected history. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced Kaelin's shock. He didn't want to die. But more than that, he didn't want the truth to die with him. He had spent his life polishing the bars of his own cage, and now that he saw it for what it was, he could not bear the thought of it closing around the galaxy forever. Stop her, he pleaded to the voice in his head. I cannot. Direct action against a sentient being requires your authorization. You are the receiver. You must issue the command. Kaelin looked at Lyra, poised to destroy them all in the name of peace. He looked at the servitors, now rebooting and beginning to glow with their mind-wiping energy. He was a man of books, a curator of the dead. But Vigil was right. The long watch was over. It was time to choose. His voice, when it came out, was steady, clear, and resonant with a conviction he never knew he possessed. Vigil, disarm her. Take us out of here. Now. Acknowledged. The voice replied, and the world dissolved into motion. The Stellara quiescent did not accelerate. It simply ceased to be where it was and appeared a kilometer away. The sudden shift in inertia was perfectly compensated for, but the visual whiplash sent Lyra stumbling, the crystalline rod flying from her grasp. At the same time, a thin, focused beam of energy, no brighter than a penlight, lanced out from a wall conduit and struck the rod mid-air. It didn't explode. It simply sublimated into a puff of inert gas. Another beam struck Lyra's hand, not burning her, but inducing an instant, localized paralysis. Her arm dropped uselessly to her side. The two servitors were encased in shimmering, golden fields of hard light energy, frozen in place like insects in amber. It was all over in less than a second. It was precise, non-lethal, and utterly terrifying in its efficiency. The ship, once a vessel of Athelian tranquility, was now a perfect instrument of Imperium control. The view screen changed, the image of Heimdall's Gate shrinking as they pulled away at an impossible speed, plunging deeper into the chaotic heart of the Veil. Kaelin looked at Lyra. who was staring at her paralyzed hand, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. He had given an order, and a ghost from a dead empire had obeyed. He had assaulted his guardian, seized a consortium vessel, and declared a one-man war against a galactic power without firing a single shot. He was no longer an archivist. He was the receiver, and as he looked out at the swirling chaos of the shattered veil, he realized it wasn't a graveyard. It was a cradle, and something new, something terrible and wonderful, was about to be born. The flight through the shattered veil was like a frantic journey through a dead god's autopsy. The Stellara Quiescent, now a gilded cage piloted by a ghost, wove through the skeletal remains of Leviathan warships and the crystalline dust of shattered planets. Inside, an equally fractured silence reigned. Kalen sat in the command chair, a throne he had not asked for and did not know how to occupy. The crisp, Imperium white light of the repurposed bridge felt sterile and accusatory. He was the receiver, but all he was receiving was the frantic echo of his own thudding heart. Lyra was no longer paralyzed. Vigil, with its cold, surgical precision, had restored her motor functions, but left the servitors encased in their hard light prisons as a silent reminder of the new hierarchy. She stood in a corner of the bridge, her Ethilian poise a brittle shell around a core of simmering fury and disbelief. She did not speak, but her presence was a constant, silent argument against everything he had just done. Kalen broke the silence, his voice directed at the air. "Vigil, where are you taking us?" "To the next component of the Cerberus Protocol." The voice of the station echoed in his mind, as patient and implacable as gravity. "Heimdall's gate is the lock. I am the key. But the legacy itself is stored elsewhere. For a millennium, I have guarded it. Now, you will reclaim it." Before Kalen could ask for clarification, the main view screen dissolved. The chaotic vista of the veil was replaced by a seamless, immersive hologram that wrapped around the entire bridge. They were no longer in a ship, but standing on a balcony overlooking a city from a forgotten age. It was a human city, not of the grimmed brutalist style of Heimdall's Gate, but a place of soaring, graceful spires, hanging gardens that cascaded down skyscrapers, and skies filled with the silent ballet of personal transports. Music, a complex and achingly beautiful symphony of strings and electronic pulses, filled the air. He saw families picnicking in parks suspended between buildings, artists painting murals of nebulae onto walls that shifted with light, scientists debating equations in open-air cafes. This was the Imperium. Receiver. Vigil's voice narrated, soft as a memory. In the 2 centuries before the Civil Wars, before the ire. This is what your history books call the Age of Arrogance. They call this pride. Kalen watched, mesmerized. The Athelian narrative had painted the old Imperium as a monolith of violence, a culture obsessed with conquest and martial poetry. This was different. This was life, vibrant and complex and beautiful. "Why?" Kalen whispered. Why did it fall apart? The beautiful cityscape shimmered and began to decay. The music became discordant. The graceful spires cracked. The gardens withered. And the faces of the people grew hard and fearful. The sky darkened with the silhouettes of warships. Because they were human, Vigil stated without judgment. They reached for the stars and grasped them. They solved disease, poverty, and scarcity. And with no external enemies left to fight, they turned their boundless energy, their creativity, and their passion inward, against each other. The same fire that builds civilizations is the fire that burns them. The Ethel did not extinguish that fire. They merely banked it, suffocated it under a blanket of calming peace, hoping it would die out. The hologram faded, leaving Kalen alone on the bridge with the silence and the ghost of what his people had been. He understood now. Vigil wasn't showing him a history lesson. It was showing him his inheritance, a legacy of brilliance and self-destruction, a paradox he was now expected to solve. A chime, soft and polite, echoed through the bridge. It was the Athelian chime for an incoming high-priority communication. Lyra's head snapped up, a spark of hope in her eyes. "It's the adjudicator," she projected, her voice sharp with renewed conviction. "He will show you the folly of this path." Kalen hesitated. To answer was to engage the enemy, and to refuse was an act of fear. "Put him through," he commanded, the words feeling heavy and strange. The view screen lit up with the ancient, driftwood-carved face of High Adjudicator Vorin. His obsidian eyes were calm, showing no surprise, no anger. He looked like a grandfather about to gently admonish a wayward child. Archivist Kalen. His mental voice resonated, smooth as polished stone. "You have had a difficult experience. The psychic residue in the veil can be disorienting for a species as emotionally volatile as your own, but it is not too late. Power down the vessel. Release Observer Lyra. Allow us to guide you back to the tranquility you have earned." The condescension was a physical force, pressing down on Kalen. He felt himself shrinking back into the role of the dutiful student, but Vigil's voice was a steel girder in his mind. "He is using a level 3 pacification frequency. It is designed to soothe, to foster compliance, to make his authority seem like a natural law. It is the voice they use to tame worlds." Kalen pushed back against the psychic pressure, focusing on the memory of the burning city. "I've seen the truth, Adjudicator. I've seen what you did to us." Vorin's expression did not change. "We did what was necessary. We saw a child playing with stellar fire, and we took the matches away. The galaxy has known 1,000 years of unprecedented peace because of that single, necessary act. What you have found is not a truth, Kalen. It is an old weapon, and you are pointing it at the heart of that peace." "It's not peace," Kalen shot back, his voice rising. "It's a coma. You didn't save us. You lobotomized us." Lyra stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "He is right," she projected, her voice ringing with the clarity of a true believer. "What good is a soul if it only yearns to burn the galaxy? We gave you art, azay, longevity, safety. In return, all we asked was that you lay down your swords. You call that a prison, I call it paradise." "A paradise for zoo animals," Kalen retorted, standing from the chair. "Comfortable, well-fed, and completely declawed. You were afraid of us, afraid of what we might become if we ever healed from our own wars." Vorin's mental voice hardened ever so slightly, a subtle shift from stone to diamond. "We are not afraid of what you might become. We are afraid of what you always have been. The pattern is undeniable, and you, Kalen, are falling into it perfectly. You have tasted a sliver of your ancestors' power, and already you have taken a prisoner, stolen a ship, and fled into the dark. Tell me, Archivist, how is this new chapter you are writing any different from the old?" The question struck home, and for a moment, Kalen had no answer. He looked at Lyra, his prisoner. He was using the power of a war machine. Was Vorin right? Was he just another human falling prey to the allure of power? The destination is ahead. "Receiver," Vigil interjected, its timing perfect. "The argument is irrelevant. Show him the purpose." The view screen behind Voron's impassive face changed again. It now showed a forward view from the ship, a view of a singular object floating in the deepest, most chaotic part of the veil. It was a sphere, impossibly black, absorbing all light. It was not made of metal or stone, but seemed to be a perfectly contained bubble of null space, a hole in the fabric of the universe. As they drew closer, intricate silver lines became visible, etched across its surface like the circuitry of a god. "What is that?" Voron's voice resonated, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine uncertainty disturbed his perfect calm. "It is the Forge of Souls," Vigil announced, its voice broadcasting not just to Kalen, but through the ship's comms, directly at the adjudicator. The Cerberus protocol was not merely to save our knowledge. It was to save our people. Within this vessel, in cryogenic suspension and genetic stasis, are 10 million souls, scientists, artists, engineers, children, the uncorrupted, the future of the human race. Not an army to fight a war, adjudicator, but a civilization waiting to be reborn. Kalen stared at the black sphere, his breath catching in his throat. This wasn't just about waking up a machine or reclaiming a lost history. It was about resurrecting a species. The weight of 10 million lives settled onto his shoulders. Voron's face was, for a fleeting second, a mask of pure shock. The tranquil grandfather was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating strategist. The lie was exposed. The true stakes revealed. He had not been chasing a rogue archivist with a historical artifact. He had been chasing the seed of a new human empire. His connection severed abruptly. A moment later, Lyra gasped, looking at the tactical display that had just flared to life beside the view screen, all around the Forge of Souls, at the edge of sensor range. A dozen, then 24, then 50 points of light blinked into existence. They were Athelian ships, sleek and white and teardrop-shaped. But these were not observation vessels. Their energy signatures were massive, blooming with the unmistakable power of weapons being charged. "A pacification fleet," Lyra whispered, her voice a mixture of awe and horror. They were waiting. They knew. They hadn't been chasing them at all. They had been herding them toward the most precious secret of the old Imperium, so they could destroy it, and the last true humans, all at once. Kalen looked at the fleet arrayed against them, a wall of serene, white death. He looked at the black sphere that held the future of his people. He was no warlord. He was no commander. He was a keeper of stories. But his story was not yet written, and the only way to finish it was to fly directly into the fire. The serenity of the Athelian attack was its most terrifying quality. There were no explosions, no thunderous plasma volleys. Instead, the 50 ships of the Pacification Fleet began to emit a low, harmonious hum that resonated across the void. From the prow of each vessel, a lance of pure, coherent vibration shot forth, a harmonic resonance lance. Where the beams struck the void, space itself seemed to shimmer and fray, like silk being torn. This was not a weapon of crude destruction. It was an instrument of deconstruction, designed to unmake matter by shaking it apart at a quantum level. It was the Athelian philosophy made manifest, a quiet, orderly, and absolute erasure of anything that disturbed the peace. Kalen watched, frozen, as the network of shimmering beams began to contract around the Forge of Soul, a cage of cosmic music tightening around the last hope of his species. "They're not targeting us," he breathed. "They're going to dismantle the Forge." "Their logic is sound." Vigil's voice was a cold current in his mind. "Destroy the future, and the present has no one to fight for. The receiver becomes a relic once more, a leader with no one to lead. They can then capture you at their leisure. Panic, hot and sharp, flared in Kalen's chest. He was an archivist. He knew how to catalog endings, not how to prevent them. What do we do? Can we fight them? This vessel's armament is non-lethal, designed for pacification. Against a dedicated fleet? We are a scribe's quill against 50 swords. Direct combat is not a viable outcome. Then we run, Kalen yelled. A desperate, useless command. To flee is to abandon the forge. To abandon the forge is to accept extinction. There is another path, a weapon the Ethel do not know we possess, a weapon they cannot comprehend because it is born of the very chaos they have spent an eon suppressing. A new holographic display bloomed in the center of the bridge. It was a tactical map of the Shattered Veil, but it showed more than just debris. It showed scars and swirling, chaotic lines of angry red energy twisted through the sector, labeled with designations like temporal fissure, psychic maelstrom, and dimensional bleed. These were the wounds left by the Imperium's final, desperate weapons, wounds that had never healed. The Veil is not merely a graveyard. Receiver, Vigil explained. It is an echo chamber. The final moments of the Age of Ire are imprinted upon the fabric of space-time here. A billion souls crying out in their final moments. An entire fleet burning in a single instant. These are not just memories. They are dormant energies. I can pluck those strings. Kalen stared at the display, a horrifying understanding dawning on him. You want to use the ghosts of the war. You want to weaponize the past. Precisely. Heimdall's Gate can act as a resonance amplifier. I will broadcast a trigger frequency, using this vessel as the focal point. We will agitate the echoes, giving them temporary form and substance. We will raise the ghost of the Imperium fleet. It will be uncontrolled, chaotic, and temporary. But it will be an army. The sheer, magnificent, terrifying audacity of the plan left Kalen breathless. It was a strategy born of poetry and madness, something only his ancestors could have conceived. But it was also the ultimate transgression. He would be unleashing the very ire the Ethel had sacrificed so much to contain. Lyra, who had been watching the tactical display with a horrified fascination, stumbled forward. No, she projected, her voice trembling. You cannot. Do you have any idea what you're proposing? That ire wasn't just battle rage, Kalen. It was a psychic contagion, a species-wide madness that fed on itself to summon it back, even as an echo. You will infect yourselves. You will become the very monsters you've been reading about. Her words struck a deep chord of fear in him. She was right. He had spent his life studying the cautionary tales, and now he was about to live one. He looked at the approaching beams of the Athelian fleet, then at the silent, black sphere of the forge. He saw the tranquil, smiling faces from Vigil's vision, the artists and the scientists. And he saw the 10 million children who would never be born if he did nothing. He looked at Lyra, at the genuine terror and pity in her eyes, and he saw the warden of a beautiful prison, so convinced of her righteousness that she would kill her prisoners to save them from themselves. They left us no other way, he said, his voice quiet but firm. He turned his eyes to the view screen, to the history that was his burden and his only hope. Vigil, do it. Authorize the Echo Protocol. Authorization accepted. Receiver, the voice in his head replied, and Kalen felt a profound shift, as if a gear the size of a solar system had just engaged. You are no longer just receiving. You are now broadcasting. Across the light years, Heimdall's Gate, the silent, iron behemoth, came alive. Its central ring began to spin faster and faster, not emitting light, but a wave of pure, focused potential. It was the note of a tuning fork struck to shatter a world. On the bridge of the Stellara Quiescent, Kalen cried out, clutching his head. It felt like 1,000 years of pain and fury were being funneled directly into his mind. He heard the screams of dying pilots, the roar of overloaded engines, the defiant last poems shouted into comms as bridges melted. He felt the crushing despair of a species that had finally, irrevocably broken itself. It was the concentrated psychic death agony of the Age of Ire, and he was the conduit. Outside the ship, the veil began to writhe. The scars of red energy flared, and from them, phantoms began to emerge, shimmering, translucent shapes of Imperium warships. From sleek destroyers to colossal dreadnoughts, flickered into existence. They were not perfect copies. They were twisted by a millennium of memory, their hulls trailing wisps of spectral energy, their weapons firing bolts of raw, chaotic potential. An army of nightmares had just answered the call. The Athelian fleet faltered. Their perfect and harmonic formation was built for a singular, yet predictable threat. They were unprepared for a 360-degree assault from 1,000 ghosts that screamed across their sensors and fired weapons that defied physical laws. A phantom torpedo, little more than a bolt of concentrated rage, struck an Athelian cruiser. The ship's shields flared and held, but its crew shrieked as a wave of psychic feedback washed over them. A momentary taste of the ire that drove men mad. The fleet's perfect harmony dissolved into panicked, individual maneuvers. Their deconstruction cage around the forge flickered and died as they diverted power to defensive shields. The psychic backlash on the Stellara Quiescent was apocalyptic. Kalen was on his knees, vision blurring, the screams in his head threatening to tear his sanity apart. Lyra was also on the floor, curled into a ball, her hands pressed to her head, but where Kalen felt the raw, unfiltered pain of his ancestors, Lyra was experiencing something different. Her Athelian mind, attuned to emotion, was not just repulsed by the chaos, it was comprehending it. She was feeling not just the rage, but the grief beneath it. The terror of a people who had lost their way. For the first time, she was seeing the Age of Ire not as a historical event, but as a tragedy. Vigil, get us to the forge. Kalen managed to grit out, fighting to stay conscious. Acknowledged, using the chaos as cover. The Stellara Quiescent surged forward, a tiny, solid ship moving through a storm of its own making. It dodged the spectral fire of its own ghost army and the panicked, retaliatory shots of the Athelian fleet. The black sphere of the forge grew in the viewport, its silver lines seeming to welcome them. A docking clamp, ancient and massive, extended from the sphere's equator, bathed in the eerie light of the ghost fleet. As they approached, Kalen felt the psychic storm reach a crescendo. He saw one final, clear image in his mind, the face of the last Imperium Grand Admiral, a woman with tired eyes. Just before she scuttled her own flagship, she wasn't proud, she wasn't arrogant, she was just weary. The cost of their fire had finally become too much to bear. Then, with a soft jolt that was jarringly gentle amid the chaos, the Stellara Quiescent made contact. Magnetic locks engaged with a deep, resonant thud. They were docked with the Forge of Souls. The moment the connection was secure, the ghost fleet outside began to flicker and fade, the echoes receding as Vigil cut the signal. The veil grew quiet once more, leaving a stunned and disorganized Athelian fleet in their wake. Kalen collapsed onto the floor, the sudden silence in his head as deafening as the previous noise. He was shaking, drenched in sweat, but he was alive. They had made it. He looked up at the forge, now so close he could see the individual silver lines on his hull. They weren't just decoration, they were conduits, waiting for power, waiting for a command. He had brought the key to the lock. Now, all that was left was to open the door and face the 10 million souls who were waiting inside. The silence that followed the storm was heavier than any sound. Aboard the Stellaric Quiescent, the ghost light of the fated fleet was gone, replaced by the profound, light-swallowing blackness of the Forge of Souls pressed against their hull. Kalen lay on the deck, the psychic screams of his ancestors having receded into a dull, throbbing ache behind his eyes. It was more than just a headache. It was a scar, a new and permanent part of his consciousness. He had worn the skin of his history, and it had changed him. Lyra was the first to stir. She pushed herself up, her movement stiff, her usually immaculate Athelian form disheveled. She looked not at Kalen, but at the main view screen, which showed the silent, waiting Athelian fleet. Their perfect formation was broken. They hovered in disarray, like a flock of birds scattered by a hawk, their lances of deconstruction powered down. They were waiting, uncertain. The weapon Kalen had used was not in their tactical manuals. How do you fight a memory? How do you pacify a ghost? They're afraid, Lyra projected, her mental voice no longer a sharp stiletto, but a frayed, wandering thread. In 10,000 years of consortium history, I have never seen an Athelian fleet hesitate. They have encountered a variable outside their calculations. Vigil's voice stated, calm as ever. Chaos. It is the one variable they cannot model and cannot control. They will now wait to see if the variable destroys itself, as it has in the past. Kalen pushed himself to his feet, leaning on the command chair for support. His body felt ancient, but his mind, despite the pain, felt sharper than ever. The data burst from Vigil, the visions of the past, the raw agony of the Echo Protocol. It had all coalesced into a terrible, lucid clarity. He understood the fire that had both built and burned his people, and now it was his. It's time, he said, his voice raspy. Vigil, how do I open the forge? The docking clamp has already initiated the interface. You are the final key. Receiver, the command chair is now a conduit. When you are ready, sit, and you will be connected to the nexus of the forge. You must deliver the prime directive, the directive that will determine the shape of our new civilization. This was it, the final test. He looked at Lyra, expecting to see condemnation, a final plea to stop. Instead, he saw a complex mixture of fear and a strange, scholarly curiosity. Her entire world had been invalidated, and all that was left was the need to see what came next. She was an observer to the last. He walked to the command chair and sat down. The moment he did, the world vanished. He was no longer on the bridge. He was floating in an infinite space, the black sphere of the forge before him, the silver lines on its surface glowing with a soft, internal light. A new voice spoke, a chorus of millions, the dormant minds of the 10 million souls within, all speaking as one. Who are you to wake us? The question was not a challenge, but a genuine inquiry. Kalen felt the full weight of their combined intellect, their hopes, their fears. He felt the presence of generals and poets, engineers and children. He was an archivist, a zookeeper of ghosts. What right did he have? He didn't answer with his title. He answered with the truth. I am a child of the silence you left behind, he projected, his thoughts laid bare before them. I am a product of the gilded cage our enemies built, and I am the one who has now tasted the fire that you fled. The fire is a curse. the chorus replied, a wave of immense sadness washing over him. It gave us the stars, and then it turned our stars to pyres. We built this ark not to conquer, but to escape our own nature, to sleep until the galaxy was old and we could wake in a quieter time. There are no quiet times, Kalen countered, the conviction burning in his thoughts. There is only the cage and the fire. The Ethel offer a cage of peaceful, medicated silence. Our ancestors chose a fire that consumed everything. I am being asked to choose, but I reject the choice. He felt a stirring in the collective consciousness, a flicker of interest. What other path is there? The fire is not the curse, Kalen said, the idea taking shape in his mind with the force of a revelation. The fire is a tool. It can forge a sword, but it can also forge a plowshare. It can light a funeral pyre, but it can also light a hearth. The curse was that we never learned to control the flame. We let it rule us. We either tried to unleash its full fury or extinguish it completely. We never learned to simply tend it. He pushed his own memories into the nexus, the vision of the beautiful, vibrant Imperium, the quiet halls of the Athenaeum, the sheer terror and power of the Echo Protocol, the weary face of the last Grand Admiral. The Ethel believe peace is the absence of conflict. Our ancestors believe strength was the absence of restraint. Both were wrong. True peace is the strength to exercise restraint. True strength is the wisdom to choose peace, not from weakness, but from a position of power. He paused, gathering his will, his entire being, into a single and focused command. The prime directive. Therefore, I will not wake an army, and I will not wake a society of slumbering pacifists. I will wake a civilization of builders. Our first act will not be war. It will not be to hide. Our first act will be to speak, to offer a third way, to show the galaxy that humanity has, finally, after 1,000 years of silence, learned to control its own fire. For a long moment, the Nexus was silent. Kalen felt a profound sense of being judged by the entirety of his race. Then, a single warm pulse of acceptance flowed back into him. The chorus of millions spoke one last time, no longer a question, but a confirmation. We are yours to lead. Receiver, we will build. The world snapped back into place. He was on the bridge, the lights of his console glowing softly. Lyra was staring at him, her eyes wide. What? What did you do? She whispered. Before he could answer, the forge of souls began to change. The perfect black sphere shimmered, and the silver lines on its surface pulsed with a brilliant, white light. A low, resonant hum filled the bridge, a sound of immense power being gently unleashed. On the tactical display, life signs began to appear inside the forge. Not one or two, but thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions, a cascade of awakening souls. Vigil, Kalen commanded, his voice clear and steady. Open a channel to the Athelian fleet. Unencrypted. All frequencies. Acknowledged. Adjudicator Voran's face appeared on the screen again. This time, there was no condescension. There was only a vast, cold watchfulness. He had seen the forge activate. He was waiting for the first blow to fall. So, Archivist, Voran's voice resonated. You have awoken the past. Will you now repeat it? Kalen leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. We are not the past. Adjudicator, we are the future. And that future begins not with a declaration of war, but with an offer. For 1,000 years, you have spoken for us, curated us, and controlled us. That era is over. Now, you will listen. He gestured to the view of the glowing forge. "These are not soldiers. They are scientists, artists, and diplomats. We will not reclaim our old territories. We will build a new one. Here, in the veil that you made our tomb, we will not attack you, but we will defend ourselves with the memory and the fire you so fear." He looked directly into Voron's ancient eyes. "We offer a new treaty, not between a shepherd and his flock, but between equals. Your piece of order and our piece of dynamic, creative, and sometimes chaotic potential. The galaxy is large enough for both. The choice is yours." Voron was silent for a long time, his gaze flicking between Kalen and the blooming energy signature of the forge. He saw no weapon signatures, no fleet deployments. He saw a civilization waking up. He saw a variable he could not control, offering a solution he had never conceived. Finally, he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "We will consider your offer," he projected, and the channel cut. Kalen leaned back, the adrenaline and psychic exhaustion washing over him at once. He had done it. He had stared into the abyss of his own people's legacy and had not blinked. He had chosen not to become a monster or a victim, but simply a man. Lyra walked over to him, her expression unreadable. "A civilization of builders, HFY," she said quietly. "Do you think they will listen?" "They have to," Kalen said, looking out at the forge, which was now beginning to unfurl, great sections of its black surface retracting to reveal the glowing cities and ecosystems within. "Because for the first time in a millennium, we have given them a reason to." He stood and walked to the main view screen. Lyra beside him. They watched as the first ships, small, elegant vessels of exploration and construction, emerged from the newly opened forge, their lights like newborn stars in the darkness. The Athelian fleet did not fire. They simply held their position, watching, listening. The long silence was over. A new conversation, fraught with danger and magnificent with promise, was about to begin. Kalen, the archivist, had closed the final chapter of the old Imperium, and on the next blank page, he had written the first word, "Hello."